Hi guys, everybody getting here at the same time. All right, looks like everybody's here, guys. Let's just, if we can get your cameras on so we can see who we got. And I'm the one running late today. I literally just got in the door from a session. Is it raining where you're at? No? Pouring. It was pouring between here and my studio. All right, I gotta send some files to my other computer. Give me a second. Okay. All right. Sorry, got a lot going on here, trying to juggle about 15 things at the same time. So um, just give me a second to organize myself. Who we have not on camera? Looks like. There we go. Down. Somebody's got a doggy.
Yeah.
I wasn't watching. Who said that?
Eva.
Oh, Eva. Okay.
Yeah, my neighbor came over.
Funny story. Years ago, I used to market and sell Photoshop training DVDs, and I would record them in my studio. I had a room set up there that was kind of soundproof, and apparently, I must have, for whatever reason, I had to record one at home. Maybe I had to re-record it or something. And I was in an airport, and somebody recognized me and came up to me and said, "Hey, we have your training DVDs." And I said, "Well, I'm so sorry." And they said, "What kind of dog do you have?" And I said, "What? How do you know I have a dog?" They said, "Well, we heard it barking in the background. Apparently, while I was recording the video, the dog was barking, and I didn't catch it." So, all right. So I think we're about ready to roll here. Let me get one more screen set. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do, which is pretty much the first thing we'll do for every class. Chris, you look like you're getting a workout while you're watching class. Oh, you're muted. I couldn't catch that.
Yeah, I'm just going back to my house right now.
Okay, gotcha.
I'll be there in like 2 seconds.
I was riding on the bike trail the other night out by the hospital, and I saw what I assumed was a doctor. Thought she was doing dictation as she walked, but actually I think she was learning English. So everybody does stuff while they're moving. Anyway, so the first thing we'll do is look at the images that you guys submitted. Haley, I did get your email. Just, whenever you can, do what you can, send that in. And as long as I get it this week, we're good. A couple of you don't have your names on screen here. So I'm just trying to get even from a thumbnail, trying to figure out who you are so that when we do meet face to face, I don't seem completely moronic. A couple of you are pretty easily identifiable, but a few of you I'll have a little trouble with. So I don't know where you do it. I think you can change your name in the participants list. I'm not sure. But anyway, I do want you to keep your cameras on. That is really about the only way I can verify that you are attending. And they've asked me to, it's more critical when we're face to face, obviously, because they need a trail of who was with whom if there's an outbreak or something. But for my purposes, I just need to see that you're still sitting there and eyes are open with toothpicks, not propping them up, so that I know we're in good shape. So I'm going to switch screens here and share my screen, and we'll go through the images. There were a couple that I did not get. If you submitted images and you don't see them here, let me know that, and we'll figure out what went wrong and make sure that we fix that the next time. Also, we had a couple of people that I got to get you to watch the directions a little bit more closely. When you submit those files, if there's multiple files, for example, they should be compressed into a single zip file. For example, there might be times where I want you to submit 10 images. I mean, I won't do that if they're really involved, but if everybody submits 10 images and I have to download them one at a time, that's a pain. So that's the reason for zipping them into one compressed file and uploading that with your name on it, so that when I've downloaded it, I know whose they are. All right, so let me go to the other screen and we'll start looking through those. All right, wish I could drag this down, but I can't. So same thing holds true here, guys. I'm going to go through, make some comments on these images. If any of you have questions or comments on them as well, chime in. If you have questions, why is this better than that, or why, whatever. I want to hear that. When I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see, I don't think I can see the chat window. And I can't even see all of you. So just unmute yourself and shout it out if you have a question or a comment. So
yeah, I was about to say, I realized like 2 minutes ago that I forgot to name my images. So I'm going to resubmit them if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and yours are actually the first ones up. So we're going to look at you anyway. And then if you, so let me ask you about naming the images. You have titles for them? Is that what you're saying? Or you had?
No, I just forgot to put my name on them.
Okay, no, that's fine. First week, everybody gets a pass on that kind of stuff. Okay. The reason I'm asking is that I've had students in the past who have actually titled the individual images, and that can be really cool because you're trying to tell a story with a photograph, and a title can play a big part in that. When there are image competitions, a judge or a panel of judges has literally 3 to 5 seconds to look at an image and to form an opinion before they score it. And so that title is what puts them in that frame of mind. It tells them what it is they should be seeing. So if you ever have an image, and there probably will be an exercise later in the semester for doing that, but if you have an image that you think, wow, this is what it says to me, or this is what I think it means, or this is what I want someone to think, then by all means put a title on it rather than just a generic JPEG name. I'd like to see that. So we'll go through these. I'm going to start with your, let's see if I can get this thing to move. So I have a Zoom screen, or a Zoom drop down at the top of my screen, and I really don't want it there, but I think I'm kind of stuck with it. So see if I can work around it. All right, so we'll look at these images as full screen as possible. We're looking at them in Adobe Bridge. So we'll see thumbnails on the left and the image on the right. So it looks like somebody likes sunsets.
Yeah.
So sunsets are fun to photograph. They're also a challenge sometimes to get the color right. So I will tell you this, on the 3 sunset images that you submitted, you got the exposure right, particularly on these two. You should have basically a silhouetted foreground if the subject of your photograph is the sunset. If you want to see the most vibrant color and things like that, you're not going to have a lot of detail in the foreground. So they will go to a silhouette like this. So both of these are done properly as far as exposure. This one is a pretty decent exposure as well. It has a color cast to it, which is, again, I'm not going to get hung up on that right now because we haven't really gotten into white balancing images or talking about anything like that yet. But I will tell you, when we do, an image like this can be improved greatly by changing the color balance on it. Not bad as it is, but the color balance will make a big difference. The one comment that I will make to you on all three of these images, but particularly I'd say this one, is cropping. So from the very beginning, I want all of you to recognize, and some of you already do because I saw that in some of the images you submitted, but I want you to recognize that you're not bound by the dimensions of the camera sensor. You know, just because it gives you a 4:3 image or a 16:9 or 4:6, whatever it is, you're not bound by that. You can crop images any way you want to make a little more impact. So in this image, the one thing that I do like, I'm not generally a fan, most people aren't, of having the horizon line dead center in an image. So your horizon line in this is down low, which is good. And you probably did that because you just wanted to see more of the clouds and so forth. I'll tell you that as good as the detail is throughout that sky area, there's actually more of it than we need to see, and there's a little more in the foreground. So let me just show you. I'm going to open this up in Photoshop. Oh, you may not be able to see that if I do it. You're probably still looking at at the image in Bridge, right, and not in Photoshop. Like the image isn't okay.
Yeah.
So I need to, when I do that, I have to stop sharing and share the other screen. Give me a second. Okay. So now I'm in Photoshop, and I'm just going to take the crop tool in freeform mode, and I'm going to start pulling it down from the top and especially up from the bottom, because if you look, about 25% of your image is that silhouette, and the bottom 25%, there's no detail there. So we're really not gaining anything by having it there. So if I bring that up to just show that there is foreground, but eliminate some of that and maybe even rotate it just a little bit to even that horizon line out, then I can experiment with the top. Like I could, you could make a case for bringing it down and making it really dramatic like this, or leaving it up to show more of the clouds. Let's take a look at it if we do that. Yeah, so now we've got, I think, a lot more dramatic image. Even though we're not seeing a lot of the clouds at the top, we're still seeing a lot of what's up there. We're seeing just repeated down below. So it's like, how much is enough? So if you go from your beginning image to, I have to look in my history to move this over to go back to the crop. A slimline image like this can sometimes have a lot of dramatic impact. So just keep that in mind. And in fact, it's a good thing to keep in mind literally every picture you take. Look at it and decide, is there more there than we need to see? Does it fill the frame compositionally? And we are going to get into composition in a later class, but once we do, you'll start to be able to see, I think, with a little bit different eye as far as how that works. So let me get out of this, and we'll go back into Bridge. All right. So those are your sunset images. This one I saved for last because I wanted to come back to it. This one's an interesting one. So it is, the horizon line does cut directly across at 50% in the middle, but because of the fact that we have symmetry from top to bottom, it kind of works. I do think that you can crop it a little bit, and I'll show you that in a minute. Two things. Number one, we could bring it down from the top and up from the bottom the same amount and still keep that horizon line in the middle. And then the other thing is I would crop just a little bit off of the right side, because if you see this little tree right here,
Yeah.
your eye, things that are at the edge of a frame, your eye gets drawn to them.
Okay.
And we really want to see this, like the clouds and these two trees are sort of the image. I
Mhm.
almost think this might work better as a square. So I haven't tried it. So we're going to open it up and see if it is better as a square. Let me just get it open and then I will switch screens again.
Yeah, this one's probably the oldest one out of the four. Well, not probably, it is. Yeah, I took it in my grandparents' backyard. So they have a lake where they live, and it was really still, but there was like a storm approaching in the distance, and I was like, picture time.
Yeah, so let me pull this. First, I'll pull it in from the left, or I'm sorry, from the right a little bit, just to take that tree out. And then I'm going to pull it down from the top and bottom. So you can see when you start to crop in Photoshop, you get, in the newer versions, you get this little cropping guide, which divides your image into 9 squares. This is a compositional aid. The other thing that you're getting is the little crosshair in the middle, which is telling you that's dead center in the image. So your image is definitely dead center. I mean, that horizon line is definitely dead center. You can see where the trees are. They fall right at that 1/3 and 2/3 line. So I mean, it's a perfectly balanced composition. I just want to see if we bring it down to eliminate a little more of the upper and lower detail that we don't need. Take a look at it there. So they're both good. I just think sometimes a little bit of, a little bit less is sometimes more. So
Yeah.
did it improve it a huge amount? No. I think that honestly, losing the tree on the right-hand side was probably more of an improvement than cropping it down was. But this just has a little more of a square feel to me because of the way it's designed. So that's probably what I would have done. But overall, I love the image. I love the composition on it. I love the stillness of that water that's creating that reflection, and you just needed to go just a hair more to bring it into where it would have been pretty much perfect. So pretty good job, really, guys. We are recording. I just wanted to make sure we were recording this. All right, so let me go back into, this is a little inconvenient to have to keep switching screens, but it seems it's the only way that it's going to work. So, all right, so now we are looking here. So I'm trying to clear some of the clutter off of my screen here. Not to mention, I've got some paperwork that I need to have access to. All right. So Abby, these are yours, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's take a look. Full screen if we can. So I want you to tell me about the images. Tell me what it was that kind of caught your eye, why you took the shots, and how you think you did, basically.
Like, do you want all of them or just this one?
No, we'll do all of them. So just kind of, briefly. It doesn't have to be a dissertation.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna give you a novel, and I'm
the Cliff's Notes.
Yeah.
All right.
This one I actually was just practicing with action shots because I enjoy action shots. So I was at my mom's friend's house, and he was on his bike, so I was like, I'll just practice taking pictures of him.
That's good to know. And that's kind of what I thought you were doing here. Let me look and see if I can get the metadata on that file. Yeah.
Oh no, those are big words I don't understand.
Okay, so all metadata is if you look, can you see the left-hand side of my screen over here where all these numbers and stuff? Okay, this is all of the information that was recorded when you shot the image. It's telling me the date and the time that you took it. Now that's assuming that your camera is set up properly with, you know, the date and time. It's
Mm.
also showing me up here the f-stop. It was shot at f4 at 1/320th of a second at ISO 800. So it gives me a lot of other information down below here, whether or not there was a flash or if it fired, what lens you used, what it was set at. So there's
Well,
a
that's
lot
a
of
lot of
stuff.
information.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. Some cameras will even give you GPS coordinates of exactly where the image
Dude,
was
it's
and so forth.
exposing me to everyone.
All I really look at, I look at the lens that was used, the f-stop that was shot at. Now, basically, these controls right here: the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture, which are those three things that control exposure. And so what I'm seeing is that your shutter speed, that's the one I'm most interested here, at 1/320th of a second. And that's the reason that you kind of froze most of the motion. I can see a little bit of movement in the back tire, a wee little bit of movement in his left foot and the pedal that it's on. But basically, you froze the action. And so it was probably a really good shutter speed for this image because I see even a little bit of motion in that front tire. So it's sharp because you froze most of it, but there's enough stuff moving that shows you that it actually was moving.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool in-between shutter speed for something like this. Some people would have gone for an incredibly fast shutter speed to really nail and freeze everything, and other people would have gone really slow to get a lot more blur in. So this one's kind of middle of the road, and I think it works for this image because, you know, he's sharp. His face is sharp, the body's sharp. There's just a little bit of motion in the bike, and that kind of lets us know that he's actually moving. So good job on that. Now you guys are gonna learn really quickly that I get really nitpicky on these pictures.
Oh no.
Now, the reason that I do that is not because there's major flaws or anything like that, but one of the hardest things to do when you're doing photography is to look through the viewfinder and see things the way the camera is seeing them and not the way your eye sees them, because your eye tends to see everything still in 3 dimensions when you're actually recording in 2. And so it's easy to miss things sometimes. And the more I point those out, the more you'll start seeing them as you're taking the pictures. So that's the reason behind doing it. I had a student a couple semesters ago tell me at the end of the semester, they're like, I can never look at another photograph the same way again. Like no matter who took it, I'm going to look at it and look for those flaws. And that's a great thing. That's actually a good thing to be able to do. So the only I'm going to eliminate right now the fact that we've got a little bit of a busy background and so forth. That's beside the point. The only thing that I would have tried to do a little bit differently is not to crop off the bottom of the tire, because it has a little bit of an awkward feel when that happens. Now, and I know what most people are going to say, well, my God, it's an action shot. And it is. But when you look at really, let's talk about like sports photographers, for example, somebody that's shooting a hockey game. The difference between those shots that are absolutely phenomenal and the ones that are just sort of okay, that the newspaper runs on page 23 or whatever, is that attention to detail. And getting to a position where you can anticipate action and really be looking at all 4 corners and all 4 sides of that viewfinder as you're taking pictures. Again, this is no major knock at all. Believe me, this is a pretty decent image. I'm just going to point out the little things that I can see that I think would have improved it. And that would have been the major one on here. So, but
That's
overall,
funny. My mom said the same thing.
yeah, it's not like I said, it's really not a big deal. But and you know, if we're going to talk about cropping, we could have cropped this one as well to crop out the van on the right, a little bit of the house on the left, and really, you know, bring it into him a little bit more. But it is what it is. This is our first assignment. So like I said, I'm not getting really bent out of shape here. We're just going to point out everything. Okay, so this one, let me hang on one second here. Okay, this one's kind of interesting. So you kind of backlit some foliage. I'm assuming that is a little bit of a ray off of the sun coming through there, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so anything in particular that you were going for here that you want to talk about?
Not really. I just I liked how the sun looked behind the leaves. So I was like, but then like in my head I thought to myself, but I don't want to go too ahead of myself because I don't really know how to make this look good per se. So I just kind of was like, we'll wing it and I'll turn it in and we'll see what we get.
Well, you winged it pretty good as far as exposure, because this is a tough image to get exposure correct. Usually, again, that foreground will go dark on you. You've got detail and translucence in those leaves. So, and I actually kind of like the fact that we have this little, compositionally, we have this little S curve in the foreground. I think the only, I mean, the background is pretty much out of focus. It's still competing a little bit with the foreground, but you know, overall for an attempt like this, not bad. So not throwing stones at that. All right, now I'm going to guess that this is either a mirror or it's got to be a mirror, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking at first it might have been a glass table with a mirror under
I
it. But
slipped into a second dimension and I looked up to myself and I took a picture.
you'll have to teach us all how to do that. There's a lot of
Alright, I
times
got
I'd like to
you.
get out of, I'd like to get out of the dimension I'm in sometimes.
It's okay.
All right, so explain to me what it is that, you know, why you did this and what we're looking at.
Well, first, as you can see in the bottom, I was trying to get my cats to do something cool, but cats are like the worst to like take photographs of because they don't listen.
Like this image?
Yes, I kept like picking them up and putting them on and they were like, no, we're just gonna walk away. So like, as you can see, I had to put treats on the mirror for them to actually cooperate. But in the end, I was just like, well, I gotta clean off this because it's got like cat feet all over it. So I was like wiping it off and I was like, you know what? Let's just do myself.
So it's interesting because at one point during the semester, we're probably going to do self-portraits as an assignment, and self-portraits don't necessarily have to show your face. So this is actually a pretty good. Now, if I were going to do this myself and I wanted to throw a little twist or a little wrench into it, I would have probably taken it into Photoshop and reversed the image so that the words read correctly. And then it would have been harder to tell that it was actually a mirror shot.
Ooh.
And it's nice to really mess with people's minds sometimes. Like, you know, how did they do that kind of thing? Because that was the clue here. That was the tip off that everything was reversed. So it was obvious it was done in a mirror. And you're right about cats. I think the worst job in the world would have to be a cat herder.
I was like, stay on there. And they just kept running off. And I was like, okay.
Cats are evil. They have a tendency to know what it is you want, and they're not going to do it.
I know, yeah. They kept looking at me like, no, we know what you want us to do, and that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So again, minor stuff here and there, little things that we'll work on throughout the semester, but overall, not too bad. Let me go back and see who's up. Oh, the other thing I want to do as we go through this is I'm going to pick images that I'm going to pick at least one image, and we'll start that way, one image from each of you, and copy that into a folder that we're going to look at the end of this and vote on everybody's favorite image. So I'm going to say that your best image, Abby, is probably, it could be any of the first three. I'm going to let you pick.
Oh boy. I like the Leafs.
Okay.
I was actually really proud of that one.
I thought you might lean that way, so.
Yeah.
All right, so now we have Taylor, correct? And Taylor, I want to find out if you maybe misunderstood the assignment or if you're really a lot better than I think you are, because those first three images do not look like you took them.
No, I thought you meant like just find them on like Google, like things that you found like visually appealing that you wanted to do. Yeah, I totally misunderstood. But
the last one's yours. The fire shot is yours?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll address two things here. One, the fact that you found these three images interesting tells me that you're probably interested in macro photography, like you like the really close-up extremes.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can see, I'm going to put these three images up. I don't know that they're actually going to enlarge. No, they won't, because they're really small images. But the one thing that you'll notice in all three of them, especially this one, you'll be able to see a little better, is the incredibly shallow depth of field, meaning that the photographer focused on that near eye right through here. And it didn't take, I mean, how big is, if this is a fly, how big is a fly's head, right? And before you get halfway to the other side of the fly's head, it's out of focus. And that's a signature of macro photography. You have very, very limited depth of field to work with because it's that distance between, I think we touched on this a little bit last week, the distance between the camera, the subject, and the background. It's a ratio. And the closer the camera gets to the subject, the harder it is to keep things in focus beyond that focal point. So that's just kind of a, you see it in this image for sure. Definitely see it in that one, but that's a natural effect in macro photography. So the one that you did, the fire shot, is kind of interesting. This is it in a fireplace or is this is this outside?
This is outside in my fire pit.
I was going to say, if this is inside, you might want to double up on the insurance. And also, I'm seeing these 3 little lights up here that they look like outdoor lights. And those are probably the only things that if I were going to change something here, I would just spot them out. Because in a photograph, your eye goes to the area of greatest contrast. And if you want to really know what people are seeing when they look at a picture, there's 2 tricks you can use. One is to squint at it. And when you squint at that image, those 3 little lights are the first things that you see. And that's not necessarily what you want to see. You want people to see the fire. Yeah. The other thing you can do wouldn't work as much in this case because it's an abstract subject. But if you turn an image upside down and look at it, compositionally, you may see things that you didn't see when it was right side up. So those 2 things are neat little tricks. But for a straight fire shot, this is actually a really good, this is something I would hang on to. It would work really well for compositing images. Like if you need some fire to put into a photograph somewhere down the line, this would be a really good one because it has an interesting shape to it, has great color, and there's a lot of it. And that black background would make it really easy to blend into another image. So I would definitely hang on to this. As far as fire goes, this is done pretty well.
Thank you.
Very usable shot. And that's obviously the one I'm picking to put in the folder.
I don't know. I liked the fly.
Yeah, if it was your shot, I not only would have put it in, I would have voted for it myself. So.
I literally almost started crying because I thought they were actually hers, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Whoa.
Yeah, like you guys are thinking, yeah, we're out of our league here, right?
I was like, I gotta drop out now.
I'm asking for a macro lens for Christmas. I hope I can do something like that, but.
Well, the fly would be tough. Let me tell you simply because if you think cats are hard, flies are going to be a lot harder. But the other 2 would be doable, I think, with with a decent macro lens. It's a fun genre of photography to play with for sure. So I hope you get it.
Yeah.
All right. So Chris, we're going to move to you next.
Professor Campbell.
Yeah.
Chris texted me and said that he's in the waiting room.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't see that when I'm sharing. So let me pull that up. Oh, looks like Haley's in there too. All right. I think we got everybody back now. Yeah, good. Just anytime something like that happens, because I can't always see those windows when I'm doing screen sharing. And let's see, did he make it back?
Yeah, I'm back here. I'm back.
All right, cool. Why am I not seeing? Oh, there you are. Okay. Didn't see your name. I saw your face. I didn't see your name. Now I see it. All right, cool. So let's go look at these 3. So we also have sunset, or I'm assuming sunset, not sunrise, correct?
Yeah, that's a sunset.
And can you guys see, are you seeing the photograph, but without these little zoom windows? Are you just seeing the photograph? Like I've got a participant window and I've got your gallery images up, where I can see your faces. You can't see those, or you can see those?
I can only see the photo.
Faces and images.
Okay, so right now I've got my participant window blocking the sun in that photo, but you can still see the sun, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood how this was working so that I wasn't blocking your view or anything. Okay, so sunsets, again, cool images. to shoot because they offer, you know, some really cool contrast, great color, and so forth. Now this one is, again, that horizon line is dead center, and it probably would improve it to remove a little bit of the foreground, but there's a lot of detail in those waves, and sometimes there are times where that 50% horizon line, you can break that rule and get away with it. Could we make this a slim line and make it a really cool shot? Probably. We might even be able to take the sun off out of the center and move it over to a third area or something. But this is the way you saw it. This is the way you shot it. If there were large areas of bad exposure or just stuff that didn't add to it, I would probably recommend cropping it. But in this case, I think you can kind of get away with it. Done again, exposure is done well, detail in the water and so forth. So pretty good shot on that. So tell me about this. This looks like the road to West Lib.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. And so we've got the sun coming through, giving us a little bit of warmth on the road. And are you shooting it from your vehicle?
I am. That's a drive-by shooting right there.
Yeah, you're either in your vehicle or you're in danger of being run over by the next truck. So
Yeah.
tell me, I will make a couple of comments on this one. I'll probably open this in Photoshop. Actually, let's do that while we get ready. And then let me share that screen. All right. I don't know why it does that. All right, now we're back. So I do think probably that there's maybe a little more at the top and maybe even a wee little bit more at the bottom than we need, but let's just see. Let's see if we pull this down. I don't want to pull this up too much because I do like the leading line that
Yeah.
center line gives us. So maybe just a tad there, and then just kind of, you know, because basically all of this up here,
Yeah. Yeah.
not, so there's a couple ways to do this. One would be to bring it down like that, and that's okay. It's not a huge difference, but I also see a possibility here. Wonder what would happen if we made a vertical out of this and still kept that line coming in from that edge, from that corner rather. And now we still have the vertical part of that tree. We still have the leading line from the road, and we have the sun and all that. So I don't know if we go back and forth here, not a huge improvement, like not so vastly different that it's like, wow, that's fantastic. But I'm always looking for pixels to crop off that I think might improve the image a little bit. And so I think probably a little bit more of a vertical out of this might have done it. And again, I know you guys at this point are not thinking beyond, you know, this is the way the camera took it and cropping, but I keep throwing this at you guys because I do want you to start thinking along those lines. All right, so let me get out of that. And we'll go back to look at your last image. Not sure, this looks like on Pitt's campus.
Yeah, it is. I don't know the church's name, but it's right by the Cathedral of Learning.
Yeah, I did a wedding. I did a couple of weddings in there actually years ago. Not a place I would recommend. If anybody in here actually contemplating or actually have shot a wedding, like as a friend asked you, say, hey, can you take some pictures, whatever. Let me tell you, if somebody does ask you, run. I did weddings for 35 years, and unless somebody's going to fly me somewhere warm in the wintertime, I'm done. Like I'm just done. The stress levels, the amount of work that goes into it, some great creative possibilities, but it's a lot of work. But anyway, yeah, this is, I've been to this church before. So low vantage point looking up, which gives you that convergence. Tell me about the tree on the right. Is that there because you couldn't,
No, I
get
did it on purpose.
okay, tell me why.
Yeah, so when you look at it like regular, it would have been a really symmetrical picture. Like it would, so if like that tree wasn't there, it would be like really symmetrical. Like each side would, like if you split it right down the middle, it would look pretty similar. But I
Right.
thought the tree coming in was like, I don't know. I just thought that was like nature coming into it. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I just thought it was cool on that half of the picture.
Yeah, and to be honest, as I looked at it, I envisioned it both ways. And I think it would have been a great shot without the tree because it would have been symmetrical and it would have been an unusual angle and so forth. But I kind of agree with you that the tree adds, it kind of takes that away and adds a little something different to it. So, yeah, I'm not going to throw stones. Again, I see two things here on this image that, again, are things we have not gotten to yet. But let me open it up into Photoshop and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Stop that. Okay. The first one I can't really do a whole lot about because it's color balance and that needs to be done at the time the file's processed. But from a contrast perspective, I want to see what this looks like. I'm going to add an adjustment layer here to increase some contrast. I'm going to brighten the whites up and I'm going to darken the blacks. Not to the point where we lose detail. And then I'll fudge the midtones a little bit as well. And when I turn that on and off, now disregard the fact that we've lost some detail in the clouds because that's easy to bring back. But do you see the difference in the overall snappiness, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
of that building?
More vibrant.
Yeah, definitely. It makes it pop a little more. So most digital cameras record an image that looks like this. It's up to us when we get into processing to add a little bit more to it to bring some more of that detail out. And I'm just pointing that out. We haven't done it yet. We haven't gotten to that point, but we will. So, just be aware that your camera doesn't necessarily, out of camera, doesn't necessarily give you a
I'm
phenomenal.
pretty sure that was a phone, to be honest with you.
That was a phone? Yeah.
Pretty sure that was a phone.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. It's just something that if I have a phone, I do photography with that just as much. Just because I see it and it just happens. I don't have a camera on me.
Yeah, so yeah, to be honest, I hate to admit it, but I do too, just simply because I don't want to carry a camera everywhere I go. This weekend, I did some test shooting with a mermaid tail, and I needed some for a concept shot that we're doing. I needed some images of fish, and so we were up at Cheddar's at the Highlands for dinner, and they've got that huge aquarium with all the fish. And I just took my cell phone and shot a whole bunch of images. And I mean, wow. I mean, what more do you need? Like the resolution is good. The clarity is good. I can blend those into any image and make them look good. So not a problem at all. Now, the drawback to that is that you don't have the same level of control
Yeah, absolutely.
over the exposure triangle and all of that. But in a pinch, hey, it works.
Yeah.
So I actually, for me, I'm torn between your sunset and the cathedral picture. So you tell me which one you like better.
I like the sunset one a little bit. I don't know. To be honest with you, like they're both like whatever for me. Like I like the sunset one. I was on vacation. That one was taken with like an actual camera. So like I did manipulate a little bit more things, but the one on the right, I probably edited that more. So I don't know.
Well, I was leaning towards the sunset as well, just because I do like the detail that you got in the foreground on that. All right, so David, I got your images, but I was not able to look at them yet. So this is my first look here. Let me pull these up one at a time. All right, so they're a little, yeah, they're small. They came in as only 640 pixels by 426. So not sure what happened.
I was having issues sending them for whatever reason.
Oh, that's
Like, it
right. You
wouldn't
did.
send through
Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah. Even the email, it had the same problem with the email. Like the full size image, you couldn't send through email. Was that what was happening?
It kept saying it wouldn't send, and then I tried to send it through like the mail drop, the airdrop, and it wouldn't go through that either. So I had to shrink it a little bit and send it.
We got enough to look at here. So we're in good shape. They're not, it's not like they're tiny little thumbnails or anything. So it looks like I'm just going to go through the 3 here. So I think I know where that is. I actually just shot a magazine cover there the other day. Not sure where
They're all
either.
Ogilvy.
They're all at Ogilvy. So
Yeah.
you look like you either like outdoor. You did tell me that you liked like nature, landscape, that kind of stuff, right? So this image, for example, is one that could probably be enhanced quite a bit in Photoshop to bring that out even a little bit more. So when we get into composition, we start talking about, I've mentioned leading lines a couple of times. This has a little bit of that. We read from left to right. So typically we want something to start on the left-hand side of the image and pull us in to the right, which the stream kind of does. It starts in that lower left-hand corner and goes in through. And then we have some interesting shapes being created by the greenery. Like I said, I could envision what this would look like with a lot of manipulation. Would definitely improve it a lot, but as is, not too bad. This is kind of an interesting one because I'm assuming that it was the reflection that really kind of caught your eye here, correct? In the water. The fact
I was trying to get the ripples.
No, you got it.
There was like the water was moving, so that's what I was kind of aiming for. I just got the camera the day before yesterday, so I shot like 400 pictures yesterday.
I want to look at the. Okay, so yeah, your metadata on that, which I'm assuming you probably just were shooting them in automatic. Everything was automatic, right? So it was setting everything for you. Is that correct?
No, I was kind of moving them and playing around with some of the settings.
Okay.
So I was kind of moving them.
So I will say that your ISO on this shot was at 16,000. Typically, I don't recommend an ISO that high because you're probably going to get some noise in the image at full magnification, and you probably could have gotten a shutter speed close to that with a lower ISO. You just would have had to change the aperture to compensate a little bit. But it does look like it was, for the ISO to be 16,000, I'm guessing that it wasn't the brightest area. Like you weren't out in full sun anywhere, that's for sure.
It was probably 7 o'clock or so.
Yeah.
When I shot those. So.
Yeah, I would have guessed that. I mean, it's sort of like, if you ever watch a golf tournament on TV and it runs late and they're talking about these guys playing in almost near darkness and you're looking at it thinking, well, it looks fine to me. It's just because of the way the cameras compensate. So this, you could say, well, I shot that at noon or I shot it at 8 o'clock, and the exposure compensates for that, lack of lighting. So it's really kind of hard to tell. But the ISO was the dead giveaway that if it had to be that high, obviously you were in kind of dim conditions. This one I really think is pretty cool. I like the fact that you used the light in that pond to backlight the water droplets coming down. You also got there's a light on both sides. So the one on the near side lit the basin of that fountain, and the one on the backside backlit the water droplets. I like that. I like the exposure being a little bit darker and more subdued, gives it a little more mood. Without a doubt, this is the strongest of the 3 images. And even the fact that the shutter speed is a little bit slow enough to make those water droplets put a little blur in them, that's kind of cool. Again, it's not tack sharp and it's not complete blur. It's right in the middle, and I think that was probably appropriate for that image. So that one's my favorite one of the 3. And so we're throwing that into the mix here.
That was fun too.
Yeah, and I love things. You'll see this as we go through the semester. You'll probably get a handle on it. That I love things that are a little more dramatically lit. I like stuff that's a little more offbeat and just not the everyday. Here we are outside on a sunny day kind of look. Something that has a little more mood to it. So if you want to impress me, look for shots like that. This is one of them. Jacob is up next. All right, so we've got, let's look at this first. Let me actually take a quick look at the metadata on all three before we go in. 1000th at 32, 125. Okay. So tell me what we have here, Jacob.
I was trying out like a faster shutter speed and just poured water to capture the water in motion. This is a test image.
Gotcha.
That was cool.
So I like I like the thought process there. I will tell you that it probably would have been more effective to have either a much darker background behind the water, or maybe a lot more distance between the water and the background, so that it would have been out of focus and the water, we could have concentrated on the water. Because to be honest,
it was more focused in the background.
To be honest, I didn't even see the water droplets at first. It wasn't until, late. I was just kind of looking at the flowers and things at first. But the thought process is good. I like the thought of, let's put something in motion and see how we can capture it. So from that point of view, and if you want to really take this image and see if we can do something just as it is to make it more dramatic, let me take it into Photoshop. So compositionally, the two things that are more dramatic and more impactful in a photograph as far as geometry is concerned are diagonals and triangles. So the water droplets that are coming down are, kind of almost straight up and down. But if let me reduce the size here. If we pull this in a little bit, and not what I wanted to do. There we go. So let's put a crop on this and then rotate it so that we have the water droplets kind of coming across the frame. And we're going to expose a little corner here, but that's okay. Now we've got a diagonal that we made not only out of the water droplets, but the flowers beneath them have a diagonal going in the opposite direction. So that kind of makes it a little cool as opposed to that. So I'm just, again, and on the right side of the image, from the water droplets over is kind of, it's kind of all the same. So we don't really need too much similarity in that image. So I'm just kind of throwing ideas at you that you might next time think about switching it up a little bit, because I think this would have been a little better that way, but it's still, I like the thought process. So let me get back to Bridge. Now this one, I like this a lot. I will tell you, looking at the metadata, this would have been an image to probably bump the ISO up a little bit, because your shutter speed on this was like 1/4 of a second. So even when you took the picture, you probably heard it sounded very slow, right? Yeah. And so when you have a slow shutter speed, regardless of what lens you're using, it's really hard to hold the camera steady enough to get a tack sharp image. And there is a wee little bit of movement where it's not quite as sharp as it could be. It's pretty good. For 1/4 of a second, it's actually really good. But what I do like is just, again, the mood that's created here. The only suggestion I would have made would have been to crop it probably square. Bring a little bit off the right, a little bit off the left, center more on that object, and I think it might have made a little more powerful, because there is a little something, looks like power cords or maybe something off to the left there. Yeah, anytime your eye goes to something and you're like, what is that? It shouldn't be there. So just keep that in mind. I want you guys to get really critical when you start looking at your images, like, oh, that shouldn't be there. I either have to crop it out or retouch it or whatever, because it really does make a difference. And if you do that, when you start doing that, show me the before and after. Show me where you started and where you ended up, because that helps me, determine where your thought process is. But this is a striking image the way it is. I like the color in it. This looks like a Navajo blanket or something like that. Your point of focus on this is interesting. It's about in the middle, maybe a little bit back past the middle, so that the foreground from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner is pretty much out of focus. And then the opposite diagonal is pretty much in focus, which is kind of unusual for an image. Not saying it's bad or wrong, just pointing it out. Because we talked, I think we touched briefly last week that wherever your point of focus is, generally 1/3 in front and 2/3 behind will be in focus. And you're in pretty close to this, right? This isn't something you shot from a distance. You're in pretty close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why that foreground, just like the macro shots we were talking about, is why the foreground goes the way it does. But it's just an interesting color and shape. You know, you've reduced it to basically one dominant color and a neutral and a bunch of shapes, and it's kind of hard to argue against something like that. The simpler an image is, sometimes the more effective it is. I do think that your strongest one, though, is your center image.
Yeah.
That's the one that just kind of reminds me of something I'd see on Star Trek, so I like that. I watched Star Trek before it was cool, so I go way back. I saw the originals in 67 through 69 as they aired. That's how old I am. All right, let's go on. I'm trying to keep a look here to make sure I don't lose somebody. If anybody does get bumped off and somebody else sees it, let me know. I'm trying to keep an eye on that. All right, where are we at here? Alana is next. There we go. All right, so I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I really like all three of these images. For different reasons, they all have something that's really kind of cool going for them. So let me look at the metadata first. Oh, didn't record on that one. Is this, was this done with a regular SLR camera, or is that a phone?
It was done with my camera, but it probably doesn't have anything because I put it in like a photo editing app thing. So
okay, yeah. Photoshop itself will not strip that data, but there are some apps that do. Like if you save it out of that into something else, it would. All right, so this one is ISO 100, very sharp depth of field, and then 200. Okay, so I just wanted to see where those were. Now let's look at the images. So this is kind of appropriate. Halloween's coming up. So what there's two things that I really like about this, maybe three. One is the fact that you did not show the whole scarecrow on the left. You just showed enough to scare the bejesus out of us. Number two, from a color standpoint, there's color contrast between the scarecrow and the corn stalks in the back. They're not in the same family, the color family, so it makes that stand out even more. And the fact that the corn stalks are what's in focus and it's not, almost makes it have that feel of like you weren't expecting it, it just walked into the frame. Which again, for this kind of an image, you may not have had any of those things in your head when you took this, but you know, well, they say even a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while. So, but I don't think it was that. I think sometimes people just naturally have a decent eye for photography. They don't really recognize that, you know, or why. They don't know the behind the scenes or the whys of it at that point just yet. But it just feels right. You know, you take an image and it's like, that one, I don't like that. But this one feels right. Well, this image kind of feels right. It's got a really creepy vibe to it. And I think this one's done, you know, pretty well. This is one of my favorites out of the whole thing. So let's go to the second one. So I like this again, using the sun not only as a backlight for the flag, that's always an effective trait, but to put the sun in the image and still get the exposure right. And then to the tower that's there is not straight up and down. Thank you for that. Vertical. So I said diagonals and triangles are very powerful. The things that are not are diagonals and horizontals. Not that there aren't ways to use them to make them that way, but typically if this had been straight up and down, would not have had the same amount of impact. So I really like the way that was done. Anything specifically you want to say about this one?
Not really. I was kind of in a rush because like we were just there for a little bit. But other than that, I don't know.
Well, I'm going to say that if you just saw this and raised your camera and took the picture, then based on these 3 images, excuse me, I'm going to say you're probably somebody who actually does have a really good eye for composition. And in this case, even lighting. I like the way that the exposure was done on this. Color balance, again, we haven't gotten there yet, but from the beginning, this could have been tweaked, I think, to make it a little more powerful. But overall, great image, not complaining. Now this one, and so I know where this is, obviously I've been there, but I like what you've done to it. And I've taken pictures around this area before, but I have not done this. This looks like a little bit older because of the leaves on the tree, right? This was
Actually, I just took this like a couple days ago, but I put a filter on it.
okay. So you warmed it up. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it works for this because the leaves, I think those are leaves on the silhouetted West Liberty. I think that's what they're supposed to be. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But you know, that kind of leads you to think fall. So it makes sense to make the leaves look like they're in fall. And again, exposure is done well. The background is exposed well, which makes that foreground piece go to a silhouette. The foreground of this, you know, this piece here that's out of focus, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Would I have shot it differently and taken that out? Maybe. But it also doesn't really distract me too much when I see it. So not going to complain. I think the 2 images here that I really think are the strongest are the first 2. So I'll let you pick between them.
I like the scarecrow.
Yeah, I do. I would have gone that way too. I just think that's a creepy image. And if you had just cropped it a little differently, it wouldn't have been as good. Like if you'd come into his teeth a little bit or something. I think it was, that part of it was done perfectly. So good job on that one.
Thank you.
All right, Kashmir. So we have more cats. Let me look quickly here. 400. Okay. 5, 6, 8. All right, let me pull these up. So I do seem to recall that you like cats as well, correct?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And again, cats are a little tough to photograph because they, for as much as they lay around and sleep, they never sit still when you try to take their picture. And so when they're in motion, it kind of makes it a little tough. So I'm looking to find like the sharpest area on this cat, and I believe it's his right eye, which is our left. So at least there is a sharp area, and it should be the eyes for sure. You're in, again, looks like you're in pretty close to the cat, so that depth of field is going to be very limited. The easier way to get this a little more in focus would probably be to stay back a little bit with a longer lens. It compresses that distance. You might have been able to get both eyes in focus. But I do like the fact that the background is completely, out of focus. So even though the cat is not tack sharp, it does set off well against that background. And again, I don't care if you have a dumpster in the background. If it's blurred out and you don't know what it is and it sets your subject off, you're in good shape. So that was okay. Tell me about the car. What were we going for here?
I was really just messing around with my camera, trying to practice. So I guess I didn't really have anything in mind with any of these pictures. I was just kind of finding things that I thought were interesting to photograph and practicing on them.
Gotcha. Not gonna, so for that reason, oh, by the way, do you know what cleans bugs off really well off of, somebody told me this and I tried it and it actually works. Take a dryer sheet.
Yeah,
oh my God, it'll take those bugs right off. It's amazing. It does it on the side mirrors and everything. Have no idea what that has to do with photography. I just saw the bugs and thought I'd mention it. Nice car.
Not mine.
Not yours?
No.
Too bad. Okay, so this one now, you did crop this. I can see that. It's obviously not in the camera format. And I think that was a really smart choice. I think you could have probably come down from the top even a little bit more than that, but the fact that you brought it down a little bit is a big help. So for me, that's your strongest image. I think it's, and again, the thought process behind, and you crop the car too. I see that as well. So those are things that I do want you guys to keep in mind on every shot. You should look at and say, would this be better if I cropped it in a little bit? I'd say about 50% of the time they will. So definitely a good call on this. And I think as much as I know you love the cat, I think your sunset is probably a little bit better. So we'll run that one over there. All right. And now we are, where are we at here? Robert, right, and I don't know if I asked you, do you go by Robert?
Yeah, I go by Robert or anything.
Okay. As long as I know, we're good. All right, so I'm going to tell you two, love all three of these images. I have not looked at the metadata, so let me do that. A little exposure compensation used on that one and that one as well. Very low ISO, but you're working with a really fast lens here, f1.8.
Yeah, I was working with my phone the whole time.
Oh, I see. It does say.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say it's so normally if you had a lens on your camera that went down to 1.8, that would be a really expensive lens. Let's start with this. So again, I go with the dramatic, the monotone color really works on this. The fact that the skeleton is leaning in, so which indicates that probably the camera was tilted a little bit to get to that, I'm guessing. So the only knock at all on this image are probably the highlights that draw my eye. This one down in the lower right-hand corner down here, I probably would have just cropped that one out. And then this one, I might have, again, we haven't really gone into editing or anything yet, but once we do, that would be an easy thing to edit out. And then I think you've got a even much stronger image than what it is. But as it sits here, I like it a lot. I can see the lighting direction coming from the back left on the skeleton. It looks like, is it material hanging on the right side? I can't tell exactly what that is. It looks like a wall to the left, but material on the right.
Yeah, it was my all this was taken in my girlfriend's room. So that was her tapestry that was on the one side, and she had like Christmas lights up top.
Gotcha. So that's what lit the thing was, Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so overall, as far as impact goes, I really like the image. I like the way, other than cropping it maybe just a little bit for that highlight, I like the way you cropped it. Yeah, it's a creepy image, and I think it's pretty cool. So like that one a lot. This one, again, it actually uses two different compositional techniques that you probably didn't know. One is leading lines, which is the walkway that's leading you in, not just leading you into the image, but if you follow it, it makes this curve, and it probably goes off this way, but then you've got this other one up here that almost looks like it's that it's curving back up into that area. So that's a positive thing when your eye is led into the image that way. And the other one is framing, and it's this building being framed in between the opening of the trees, because that's clearly our subject is the background there. Great definition in the sky, a little bit of highlight loss in the clouds, but overall really good exposure, pretty good composition. If I wanted to nitpick, I might have cropped a little bit off of the left-hand side to put that building, well, it is pretty close to dead center. I don't know. I would have played with it. I might not have changed anything in the long run, but I would have played with it a little bit just to see. I definitely would have left the bottom alone because I like that walkway leading in. And I don't think I would have cropped the tops of the trees off, so I probably would have left the top. If I did anything, it would have been left or right.
Okay.
But as it sits, looks pretty good. And this is another one. It's a really good use of framing. It's got symmetry, which is another compositional element that's really powerful. So that alone sometimes can carry an image, and it kind of does on this. The exposure, again, is done pretty well. I like the fact that there's a little bit of detail on the shadow side of these columns. They don't go black, but yet you don't lose the detail out in front. I think maybe if you could have probably gone a little bit darker, and you could have done that in editing, not just in the exposure end. But overall, compositionally, really good. All three of these have a lot of impact to them. I honestly, I'm going to let you pick because I think I lean towards the first and the third a little more than the middle one, but I like both of those equally well.
All right. I'd say the first one. First one's my favorite one because it's just a little different.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm not I'm not an overly creepy, I hope I'm not a creepy guy. I mean, I'm not a horror film fanatic or anything like that, but I do like stuff that has mood to it, and that one has a lot of mood. So that would have been my choice too. But I really do like the third one as well.
Thank you.
All right, Eva, you are the last one up.
Okay, well, I lost my video feed. I got audio, but I can't see anything.
Uh-oh.
Right.
And everybody else has it, so it definitely has to be on your end. You could, well, I'll tell you what, rather than, we're going to take a break as soon as we get through yours.
Okay.
So when we do that, why don't you like log out and log back in?
I'll log
and
back
see,
in?
Yeah, see if
Okay.
if it works. So I'll just describe
Okay.
the images and you tell me what you've got. So the first one with the bees looks like it is, I don't know what they're on.
My sunflower?
Oh, it's a sunflower. Okay, now I do see it. Yeah, wow. Really tight shot of a sunflower.
Yeah.
So I like this. I like, so I would have initially said I'd like to have seen the exposure a little darker because I would have wanted to see more detail in the bees.
On the
But-
bees, yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
But I'll be honest, there's something about this having a light, airy feeling to it
Yeah.
that I also kind of like. So again, it's one of those things that I would have probably tried both ways and then, made a decision then. So I'm not going to knock it. I'm just pointing out that there might have been an alternate way, but I really like that shot overall. I hate bees, by the way. Absolutely
Yeah, I do
despise
too.
them. So
they do a good job, but yeah.
for me to say that I like a picture with bees in it, that's saying something.
Yeah.
So the second one is looking up at a it's not a weather vane, but like a windmill type
The windmill.
contraption.
Okay, yeah.
And so I like the I love the perspective on this. So perspective is another compositional element that can be very useful. And the fact that this image really has a very featureless sky for the most part,
Right.
it sets the color off well. This is one of those images that I have some plugins that I use that I would love to take this image in and play with it a little bit. I think we could make this really sing. But even as it is, it's good, very good compositionally, good with the color, the simple background that it stands out again. And I love the tight crop. I am a fan of images that, tend to crop out. It doesn't show you the whole thing, but just a little piece of it. So I kind of like that. The next image looks like probably a similar, if not the same piece, just shot from a different angle. Is that right?
It's a smaller one.
Smaller one?
The smaller, yeah, windmill.
I think I like the first one better, but I still do like the tight crop on this and the very out of focus background. It's got a lot of interesting color going on. I definitely gravitate a little more towards the other one.
Okay.
So the next image looks like it's a close-up of some vines with some shrunken flowers almost.
That's my grapes aren't doing so good.
Oh, those are your grapes. Yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
not
they're not
the best year. Not the best year. I had transplanted some hydrangeas into my backyard, and they were looking awesome until about the 1st of July, and now they're complete, nothing but sticks.
No water.
No,
No rain.
So
No
the only-
wine, no wine, I guess, this year.
no, the only comment I'll make on this is we could improve it with some processing. It's a little bit on the light side. It probably could be vignetted a little bit to draw more attention to those what were grapes.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not going to say too much at this point because we haven't gotten into any editing yet. Your next image is the doorway.
Yeah. Probably
And
my
so
favorite.
I really like this, except, and I'm going to open
Okay.
this in Photoshop so that everybody else can see what I'm doing here. And let's get that back up.
Oh, there you are. See? Now I can
Oh,
see.
Now you got it? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I say or do anything, can anybody guess what my suggestion is going to be on this?
It's a tiny bit tilted, so it's not like straight up and down.
Absolutely. So in an image like this, where symmetry and balance really play an important part, if it's off by just a hair, it can negatively impact it. So all I'm going to do is rotate this a little bit, and I can watch the lines until they line up, horizontals and verticals. And then symmetrically, if I look at this, my center spot right here, it's just a little bit to the right of the center of that door. So I'm going to bring it in from the right to put that right on the center of the door. And then let me get into my history palette here. Can you see the difference there? How
Yeah.
that little tiny crop just suddenly made that a whole lot better. And again, this is another one because of the texture in it that I'd love to play with some. I'm not a huge filter fan, but I do have a couple of sets of things that are very unique, and I like working with them. And it would have really done a pretty cool job on this image. But overall, cropped like this, I love it. I mean, I think that's a very, very strong image. Let me
Thank you.
close that. And we'll get back to the last one here. I think there's one more. Yeah, the sunflowers. So you seem to, I can see you gravitate towards a couple of different ideas. One being an interesting perspective, like shooting up at items or cropping in tight on them or things like that. That's a really good thing to know. It is part of a style. So if that is, not that you'll always do that, but if that's part of your style, it's a good thing to know so that you can develop that. It can be very effective, and you've done it effectively on a couple of images here. So I don't know. I'm going to look quickly here. Wow. I mean, I really like, I like three of these. I like the doorway, even though it's a little bit off. If we consider cropping that, I think that's a really strong image. I love the close-up of the sunflower with the bees.
Yeah.
And I like the first windmill shot. So what do you think your favorite one is?
Well, if I could crop the door, yes, but
Yeah, and I think even with it not cropped, I really still, and I do like the windmill. I really like.
windmills were my favorites.
Okay.
So
so
yesterday when I took that door.
Well, let's see here. If we look at both of them together, does that help?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the windmill.
Windmill. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's throw that in. And now we're going to take a break here in a minute, guys, but before we do, these are, let me make the size a little bigger. These are the images we came up. Did I get them all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I thought there were 10. Should have been 10.
I don't think mine's in there.
Casmere, I thought, let's see. Where are you? Oh, we were going to do the sunset, but we didn't put it in, did we? No, we didn't. All right, let me go back and grab that. All right, now we got 10 images. All right, so now it gets tough because I need to be able to see you guys. Let me open my screen here a little bit. And David, I've lost your video feed. Oh, there we go. Because I just need to see hands on this. So what we're going to do, is I want you guys to vote on what you think is the best image in here. You can vote for your own image if you really like your own image, that's fine. But you can only vote once. So as we go through the images, all you have to do is physically raise your hand and I'll do a count and we'll see who comes out on top. So how many hands do I get for the sunset? Okay. How about the purple cube? Okay. The skeleton. 2. Okay. The sunset to the right of the skeleton. All right. Windmill. Okay. Backlit leaves. The symmetrical reflection. Fire. Scarecrow. I think we found our winner, guys. The last one is the fountain. All right, so our scarecrow, and that's Alana, is that right?
Yes.
All right, so let me make a note of that because you get a point for that, and that can help out immensely down the road. So let me make sure I get that on there. All right, so well done. That's but actually, as I look at these, almost any one of them could have taken. There's a few really, really notable ones. I like the scarecrow. I like this reflection. I like the skeleton, and I even, boy, I really like the what were we calling this? The windmill, and then I still like the backlit. Well, I mean, oh well, I like them all. What the heck? But I think you guys did a good job. You picked the right one. So what I'll sometimes do, because there are images that I think are well done, I may throw an extra point in here. And I'm gonna go to the reflection. Whose was that again?
Mine.
Raise your
Amelia.
hand. Yeah, okay, Amelia. Yeah, I think that image, honestly, with a slight bit of cropping, that looks like something I would expect to see in a book or a magazine. I love simplicity. I love the power of the symmetry and the balance of that image. I think that's, with a couple of really small tweaks, that one is really powerful. So well done on that. So you're going to get a point there too.
Thank you. I
Where-
also think I forgot to mention that all of my pictures were taken with my phone.
Well, pretty good job with a phone then. We're going to
Thank
make you guys better with cameras though. Okay, so it's 5:22. We're going to take at least a little 10-minute break here. When we come back, we're going to look at some basics of the camera operation itself, the camera itself, and then some basics of exposure. And that'll tie into what your assignment's going to be for next week. So because we kind of went a little long on this, let's do 15. Let's say at 5, or a little less. Let's go 5:35. We'll come back at 5:35 and we'll try to wrap up in an hour. How's that sound? All right. See you guys in about 12, 13 minutes. Oh. Looks like everybody had the same idea I did. I was hungry and thirsty, still thirsty. So the bad thing about a class this time of day is it cuts right in the middle of dinner. I'll get everybody back here before we get rolling. Only 3 to go, 2 to go. David, I have to say that so far the 2 classes, you have been in the most unusual places. So I'm not sure where you are now, but I think the last time you were in a vehicle, weren't you? Uh-oh, you just froze up on me. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, last time I was in my truck at the library.
And I can't figure out where you're at now. Looks like the camera's just, or the phone or whatever is just on a floor looking up at a wall.
Yeah, I was laying on the bed. My computer died, so I had to switch to a tablet.
Gotcha. Well, you win the award for most unusual surroundings for the 2 classes so far.
Only 14 more to go.
Yeah, you just have to see if you can keep it up and keep giving me something weird every time. It looks like, well, a couple of you are in dorm rooms, obviously. Eva, you look like you have a nice spot to be in.
Then inside with a 95-year-old, you could just take her clothes off at any time. This is where it's set up.
Did anybody see the news report the other day? There was I think it was a Board of Education meeting, and I think it was reported by a Pittsburgh news station, so it must have been in Pittsburgh. One of the board members, they were going over, must have been preliminary, like agenda and things like that, and she didn't need to be involved in that. And so she went to take a shower and didn't realize her camera was still on.
Oh, geez.
And pointed obviously right at the shower. So I wonder, I don't know, I'm not going to speculate. All right, so, well, we had Taylor and Jamie, now we've lost them, so. See, I told you I would know when you guys were passing notes back and forth. That's what's happening there, I know. It's all right, I have broad shoulders. All right, so even though we've got 2 people we're waiting on, we're gonna jump into the next part. So I want to just look at, and we're gonna gloss over a little bit of this because some of it is a little basic and some of it is not that important, but I want to touch on the ones that are. So I'm going to switch screens here so you guys can see a different screen. And let me get you up where I can see you all. Let's see if I can bring the chat up. There, okay. So we're going to look at a couple of files here. I got 5 or 6 of these PDF files. And I want to start with a couple of camera basic stuff. This one talks about shooting modes. And if you have, you know, a traditional DSLR, you're going to have a wheel on the top of your camera that looks something like this. It's going to have these little letters and sometimes little picture icons and so forth, like the ones at the bottom of this document down here. So I'm going to tell you that all of these that start like from macro close up down through sports mode, you can pretty much forget about those. They are dumb versions of what you can do far better if you just understand how the camera is working. So we're going to ignore all of those. And even, well, auto and program do have their place, or can have their place, but to be honest with you, it's these three: manual mode, shutter priority, and aperture priority. These three are the big three. Those are the big hitters, and those are the ones that once you really start to understand how the camera operates, you're going to be in one of those modes pretty much all the time. For me, when I'm shooting in my studio, which is a very controlled situation, I have lights that I control the output to and all of that, I'm in full manual mode, okay? Because I need to be able to set the aperture to match the intensity of the lights. I need to be able to set the shutter speed that it synchronizes with the flash. And I need to set the ISO for the same reasons. When I'm outside on location, if I'm shooting outdoors, more often than not, I'm in aperture priority mode, which is the A. The reason for that is my primary decision when I'm shooting outside is how much of the background do I want to be in focus? And almost always it's very little, because I do a lot of work with people. So I want the backgrounds to be blurred out and I want the people to be sharp. So in aperture priority mode, I'll first set the ISO, okay, the sensitivity of the sensor. And there's going to be some guidelines for where to set those numbers here in a minute. But if I'm working outside, you know, and it's not dark or getting dark or anything like that, I'm typically going to be at ISO 200 or maybe 400, but 200 would be my starting point. Then I'm in aperture priority mode, and I'm going to set the f-stop, or the aperture of the camera, to the widest aperture I can, and that's f2.8 on my lenses. The shutter speed will fluctuate based on the lighting condition that I'm in. So if I'm pointed over here and it's in bright sunlight and I'm at f2.8, my shutter speed might be 1,000th of a second. And when I swing the camera around and I'm still at f.28, but I'm pointed into the shadow, or the shadows, my shutter speed might drop to 250th of a second. I don't really care about that, as long as it's fast enough that I can handhold that camera if I'm not using a tripod. So I'm way more concerned outside with the aperture, and inside I have to control all three, although the aperture pretty much is constant there. So shutter priority mode, so do I ever use it? No, not directly. And what I mean by that is there are images that I want to take that I definitely think the shutter speed is the most important aspect. So like if you want to stop motion or if you want to blur motion, your shutter speed is going to be your first consideration. But honestly, if your camera's in aperture priority mode, you can still do that without having to switch it. And here's how you would do that. So let's say you have a meter in your camera for the most part. You can see if an image is showing as underexposed, overexposed, or whatever. And so if my aperture is set at f2.8 and I want a very slow shutter speed, and if the aperture is set at 2.8, I can look in the camera and see that the shutter speed, if I take the picture, is actually going to be a 500th of a second. Well, that's too fast. I want a slow shutter speed. Instead of going to shutter priority mode, I'll just rotate the shutter, or the aperture rather, from f2.8 down to like f8 or f11, so that it's getting smaller and it's letting less light into the camera. And what that'll do is it will automatically increase the shutter speed, or decrease depending on how you're looking at it. It'll make it slower. So as I use the aperture to cut down the amount of light that comes in the camera, it's automatically going to slow the shutter speed down. So that's what these two modes, shutter priority and aperture priority, you only have to control one of those and the camera will do the other. In manual, you have to do all three. So the exercise that we're going to do, probably the next couple of them, you are going to be in full manual mode. Not that you're going to be shooting that way all the time, but it's the quickest way to learn how those three things interact with each other: ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So let's go on to look at, there's only a couple of things on here that I want to talk about. This is a typical DSLR. They've removed the name and all the information because it's supposed to be very generic. And DSLR, by the way, stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex. And it just simply means that it's a digital camera that has interchangeable lenses. That's really all that means. This is a traditional camera. If you look in the opening right here in the front of the camera, you can actually see a mirror, a mirrorless camera. And I think one of you is working with a Sony, mirrorless, Chris. So you don't have that. You will not have a mirror in there. If you take the lens off, you're looking directly at the sensor. And that can be a very good thing, but can also be a very dangerous thing. Give you an example of how it can be dangerous. There are a lot of reports. I've talked to a lot of people using mirrorless cameras and shooting weddings with them. And there seems to be a lot of DJs these days using lasers. And because the mirrorless camera does not have a mirror in there protecting the sensor from the light, so that mirror flips up. When you take the picture, actually, let me back up a little bit. The reason the mirror is there in the first place is that you look in the viewfinder here, there's a mirror, or actually a prism there, that directs your eye down to the mirror. And so the light coming in the lens is hitting that mirror, going up to the prism. It's being reversed and inverted, because if it wasn't, you'd see everything backwards. And then the light comes out the viewfinder over here, right side up. That mirror is there to not only, show you what the camera is seeing, but it's there to protect that sensor. Without that mirror there, if the sensor is just out all the time, even when you're not taking a picture, it's susceptible to damage by things like lasers. A camera like this, a single lens reflex, doesn't have that problem, because unless you're actually taking the picture, that mirror is there blocking the sensor. So no light is getting to it until you actually take the picture. So just something to be aware of with a mirrorless camera. The only other thing, here's the shooting dial that we talked about that has all of the different modes on it. The only other thing that I want to talk about here is the depth of field preview button right here. Most cameras have them. I don't ever use it. It is an interesting thing to play with originally, because, and the only reason I bring it up is that I want you to be aware that when your lens is on your camera, by default, it is going to be set to the widest aperture. It's going to be opened up as much as possible to let as much light in, so that the viewfinder is bright, and you look at the image and it, it doesn't look like a dark image. When you push the depth of field preview, let's say your camera, your maximum aperture is f2.8, but you're going to take the picture at f11. You push that depth of field preview button, and the aperture will temporarily close down to f11 and show you what it's going to look like. It's kind of hard to see sometimes, but you'll actually see the image sharpen up. Like, it gets darker, but based on what you're focused on, your background may become sharper when you push that button in. And the only reason I mention that at all is just so that you're aware that by default, your lens is open at its widest aperture all the time. It's only when you push the button that mirror flips up out of the way, the aperture closes down to whatever you have the camera set at, it takes the picture, and then everything goes back to normal. So that's basically how that works. This one seems kind of basic, how to hold the camera, but there is actually some useful information on this as far as being able to handhold the camera at slower shutter speeds. I'm not going to go over all this. All of these files, all 6 of these, by the way, have been uploaded into the resources folder on Sakai, so you can access them anytime. One of the suggestions it makes on here is to breathe out when taking a picture, because if you're holding your breath, and that's what most people would try to do, if you're trying to take a picture at a slower shutter speed, most people are going to try to hold their breath, and that actually makes it it'll make your camera bounce around a little bit more. But if you slowly breathe out as you're taking the picture, your body relaxes, and you don't quite have as much of a problem with that. The elbows tucking in is a good tip. Keeping your legs a little bit apart as opposed to feet together, all little things that, that can help for stability on the camera. All right, so we're going to start with the ISO, and I told you there would be some guidelines here basically for how to use or when to use these different numbers. So outside, full sun, most of the cameras have a minimum ISO rating of 100. And so that lets in the least amount of light, but if you're outside in full sun, you don't need any more than that. So the brighter, basically the only rule of thumb you need to know here is the brighter the situation you're in, the lower that ISO number can be. And the lower it should be, because the higher it goes, the more noise you're gonna have in the image. If you look down here at these, ISO 200 is really clean, get up here to 1600, and suddenly you're getting a lot of grain, a lot of noise in that image. So you want to keep that number as low as possible based on the conditions that you're in. If I go inside, it's saying here that bright interiors they would recommend an ISO of 800. I typically try 400 first. If I can get 400 to work and get a decent shutter speed and the f-stop that I want, then I'll do 400. If I have to bump it to 800, that's fine. 1600 is probably the highest that I'll ever normally set the camera. I'm not saying that there aren't times where I'll go, you know, depending on if I'm photographing under black light or something like that, clearly you're going to go beyond that. But the general rule of thumb, keep that number as low as you possibly can under the lighting conditions that you're working under, and that's going to give you way more of a clean image. So this one talks about working in low light situations. Some of the things that are helpful to you along the top column where it says elements, or the top row, keep your lens open as much as possible in low light. That's going to bring more light in. It's going to make the shutter speed faster. You can use an external flash to add light to the subject. We're not going to get into that too much until later on. But it is definitely a big plus, especially in a backlit situation. If somebody's got the sun behind them and maybe you really like the way the sun's coming through their hair, but when you take the picture, you can't see their face because they're dark. A flash set at the right, and not an over flash, not like blowing, you know, detail out, but if it's set low from the camera position, it'll bring some detail into the face and still give you that glow that you're getting from the sun behind. Tripod, kind of a no-brainer. That will keep the camera a little more still. And anytime you're shooting outside at night, it's almost prerequisite. There are things, if you don't have, anybody actually have a tripod? A couple of you? Okay, 4, okay, 5, that's good. If you don't, there are some things that you can do to simulate that. Because a camera is relatively small, use something like this. This is actually, I just use this for my elbow. It's just a little bean bag that I rest my elbow or my wrist or something on. But something like this, maybe even a little bit bigger, if you set that down and then put your camera on it, it's going to hold it it's going to hold it better than just setting it on a tabletop, for example. There's too much potential for movement when it's sitting on something like that. This will actually cushion any vibration that's coming up through. So it's a really good alternative. Some people will buy clamps and like clamp onto the window of a car. Who was it that did the drive-by shooting? Yeah, Chris, you might mount, I don't know, something on your car if you like to shoot that kind of stuff. It's funny. I actually have, like a lot of people, I have my cell phone on the dashboard because I rely on GPS a lot. And every once in a while, I'll turn the video on if I'm in a place that I just can't believe I've got to take my vehicle and record that as I'm driving. But something like that can work in place of a tripod as well. And some people use a remote shutter release. It's showing it here as a cable. You won't find too many of those. I do have a couple of them, but mostly I use a device that I control from my iPad so that I can actually, or from a phone, can fire the camera from the iPad. I can get a preview. I can see the image. I can change settings on the camera from the iPad. There are things that you do, certain types of photography that I do, where you literally cannot touch the camera once you start. So if I'm doing a series of images that I need to have those images in perfect registration. They need to be perfectly overlapped, that nothing moves from shot to shot. I can't even push the shutter release on the camera because it'll affect that. So I'll use this device. There's a lot of them out on the market that actually lets you fire the camera and control it from a phone or from an iPad. I think the Canons actually come with software that works on your phone that way. I don't know how much control you have, but I know you can at least fire the camera that way. We're not going to talk about exposure compensation just yet. Abby, you have a question? No? Oh, okay. You're just saying hi.
No, I was just saying that the app that you can use with your Canon, I've used it before, and it's kind of, you have control, but it's very hard to like use.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know I've got it. I don't know that I've ever used it because I haven't had a need for it. The Cam Ranger that I use has a lot more functionality, and the ability to send images, to that is huge. So light painting is a technique, for example, where you're doing multiple exposures, sometimes over 100 exposures to light something like a motorcycle or a car or whatever, and all of those images have to be in exact registration. So yeah, we're not going to talk about exposure compensation just yet. We'll get into that in a later class. I will tell you the ISO and the raw factor here. So if you're using one of the Canon Rebels that some of you I know are using, or something similar to that, your camera is capable of shooting a raw file. And I recommend that highly. So it does mean that you're going to have to go into an editing application and process that file, but that's what makes those files look so much better than just a JPEG out of the camera. You don't have the same control over a JPEG. The raw files don't look that hot right out of camera because they only record the data that's in front of them, and they don't apply any of your camera settings. Like if you go in and change the saturation and the sharpness and all of that kind of stuff, it'll only affect the preview on the back of your camera. It does not affect that raw file at all. No matter what you do on your camera settings, the raw file is going to look the same. And it's designed that way because it's got, instead of a JPEG that has like this much information, a raw file's got like this much information. So you can go in and make those adjustments and make that look the way you want. You can even adjust exposure if your exposure's off without really negatively affecting the quality of the file. So I strongly suggest that we're going to talk more about it. We're going to look at it in detail in one of the classes coming up. But for now, it's definitely something I think you would want to experiment with. Gives you a couple of examples here about, where you might, what tools you might need, where your ISO might be based on what you're going to shoot, aperture and all that kind of stuff. But that's not the most important thing on there by any means. So the last one we're going to look at here is this manual mode chart. So the top row talks about what we've been talking about, that the ISO, the lower the ISO, means, you're obviously in a lighting situation where you have a lot of light. The higher the ISO goes, you can work in lower light, but you're going to have more noise in the image that you're going to have to deal with. Below that, the second row is the aperture, and it's showing you that the wider the aperture, and wider apertures are actually lower numbers. Okay, so f2 is a wider aperture than f4. It's showing you a little visual representation. That the lower numbers are going to give you a brighter image, and it's going to have less depth of field. In other words, the background will be more blurred. As you go up that scale, it'll darken the image. Now, again, we're assuming that we're in manual mode here. Because let me back up for a second. If you're in an automatic mode, in fact, even if you're in an aperture or shutter priority, your camera's got a meter in it that's designed to look at the brightness of the reflected scene in front of you. It measures the amount of light coming into the camera lens, and it sets those things based on the amount of light. Now, it assumes, anybody ever taken a picture that was over or underexposed? Yeah, we all have. Well, how can you do that if there's a meter in there metering the light? The reason is that the camera assumes, the meter assumes that it's looking at something that is average reflectance, and they call that an 18% gray. That's a middle gray. So it's not black, it's not white, it's dead in the middle of that. It's a perfect middle gray. It assumes that everything that the camera's seeing, everything that the lens is seeing would average out to be about a middle gray. If it's not, that's where you have problems. If you're shooting a black cat in a coal bin, the camera's going to see, oh my God, this is really dark. We got to bump all of this up. We got to raise all the numbers up, and your picture is going to be overexposed. Consequently, if you're shooting a white, we'll give dogs equal credit here. So if you're shooting a white dog in a snowstorm, same thing's going to happen. The camera's going to go, wow, this is really bright. We got to knock everything down, and bang, you have an underexposed image. It's only in a normal scene that that meter works properly. You have to learn to look at what you're photographing and understand, is this normal? Is this brighter than normal or darker than normal? And then adjust from there. So in manual mode, if you have your ISO set, let's say you're set at ISO 400, and you set your aperture around f4, and you take a picture and you're like, well, it's too bright, so I'm going to change it to 5, 6, or 8, your camera or your image will get darker because your meter is not compensating for that the way it does in an automatic mode. In manual mode, every change you make, you will see as a change in the exposure. And your shutter speed will do the same thing. As you raise or lower your shutter speed, you're going to get a darker image or a brighter image depending on which way you go. So what we're going to do is use this information. I'm disregarding this step 3 because not every camera meter shows you this information in the viewfinder when you're in manual mode. Most do, but they don't all. So what we're going to do for next week is I want you to shoot a short series of images. Let's go with, let's make it challenging but not too challenging. We just want 3 images. If your camera has manual mode, I want you to shoot them in full manual mode. And as you saw in the metadata tab, I will know. It'll tell me what mode your camera was in and what your settings were and everything. But I want you to shoot the same situation, the same setting, the same scene 3 times in manual mode. And the difference between those 3 images is that your ISO, your shutter speed, and your f-stop should be different in all 3 images. So let me back up and explain why we're doing this. I want them to be different, but I want all 3 exposures to be identical. In other words, none of them should be brighter or darker than the other. So let's say your first shot, I'm just going to pull some numbers out of the hat here. Your first shot is at ISO 400 at f8 at 125th of a second. Now you'd probably be in medium to brighter light to do this. And you determine that those numbers are giving you a good exposure because that's your first step. You have to set your camera to numbers that are giving you a proper exposure. It's not too light or too dark. So that's your first image. Once you've got it all zeroed in and everything in manual mode looks right, you take the picture and it's not too bright or too dark. That's step 1. In the second image, I want you to change all 3 of those settings, the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture, but set them to where your exposure still balances out. And the chart that we looked at, and I don't have that in front of me right here, the chart that we looked at last week that's in the resources folder, it shows you your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and which direction is brighter and which direction is darker. You'll know that if you change the ISO, for example, from 400 to 200, that you have to compensate one or both of those other numbers in order to keep the exposure the same. And use that chart because it's a really good resource for doing this. So you should end up with 3 photographs that are all shot with different settings in manual mode, but have the same exposure. Now, one thing that you want to be aware of, it's probably better to do this in a controlled environment like inside. You can do it outside, but if your lighting conditions are changing, it's gonna change your results. For example, if you're outside and the sun keeps going behind a cloud and then coming out or whatever, the intensity of the light is gonna raise and lower. So you may have some issues. If you're outside and that's not happening and the lighting is pretty consistent, then outside works just fine. Otherwise, go somewhere where the lighting is, fairly bright, but a little more controlled, so you don't have that changing influence happening to you. Let me get back out of this, and we'll get back to this. So does anybody have any questions? And I'll write all this up and post this on Sakai later tonight. But are there any initial questions about what it is that I'm asking you guys to do here? The goal is to get you to start thinking and understanding about how these three things work together in order to create a proper exposure. And the reasoning is that even down the line, if you're shooting outside and you're in aperture priority, you're going to run into situations where a scene is out of range. Okay, what I mean by that is, let me give you for example. So let's say we're inside a room and you're taking pictures and your aperture is set pretty wide. You're like at f4, maybe your lens doesn't go any wider than that. So f4, and you're at ISO 1600, and your shutter speed's about as slow as you can go and still hand hold that. You might say to yourself, well, I want more of the background to be in focus, so I'm going to change my f-stop from f4 to f8. The problem is that you may not have enough range on your ISO or your shutter speed to give you a proper exposure. Same thing can happen outside. If it's so bright outside and you want to shoot with your lens wide open, you might not be able to. There may be situations where it's so bright that your only option is going to be to close your aperture down and get more depth of field and limit the amount of light that's coming into the camera. So I want you all to really just start getting an idea for how those three things work together and what problems you're going to run into when you're shooting in manual mode or even in one of the aperture or shutter priority modes down the road. It helps you think on the fly. Once you really get that in your head, it's amazing how quickly you can make the adjustments. I told you we weren't going to talk about exposure compensation just yet. We're not really going to get into it, but there is a feature on the camera that allows you, without really getting too deep into it, to just say, this scene is too dark, I'm going to bump it up one step and not worry about what it's changing on the camera. It's just going to make it brighter or darker or whatever. That's the exposure compensation dial. But you have to know what it's doing because it can definitely affect the image that you're shooting. So you'll see other changes. Your exposure should stay consistent in these three images, but you will probably see other changes. If your shutter speed changes and you're shooting something that has a little motion to it, you might see that. If there's distance between, you're shooting this water bottle and you're changing your aperture, there's going to be a difference between the background and how much in focus it is. So the exercise is really twofold. One, to really show you what those controls do visually to an image. And secondly, so that you start to understand how they affect and how they interact to control exposure. Does it make sense to everybody so far? All right, cool. So I am probably going to cut you guys some slack because we did the full, actually, I think we might have gone a little bit over last time and I wasn't planning to for the first week. So probably going to let you guys out a little bit early tonight. I'm going to tell you too that I'm still on the fence about the face-to-face stuff. It's really a difficult thing to teach if you're not face-to-face, but I kind of want to put that off as long as I can. I just have this feeling, I really do. I hope I'm wrong, but I just have this feeling that some of this stuff's going to start blowing up on people. I've already seen, you've seen North Carolina, probably Notre Dame, and then I saw another one today, Georgia, I think, that have had numbers skyrocket once they went back to face-to-face. And I just don't want to get into that situation, put anybody at risk. If we go a few weeks and everything still looks cool, you know, we'll have safety precautions in place, obviously. But I'd kind of I think we kind of probably ought to wait until we get a little further down the line to make that decision. And if we do, we'll either be meeting outside or we'll be meeting with only half the class at a time. So if anybody has any concerns on that, let me know that as well. But I think I got a pretty good idea about who's, you know, I'm not squeamish for myself. I have some people around me that have some very suspect immune systems, and I don't want to take a chance on, you know, being the bad guy and making them sick. So that's the reason for that right now, but we'll see where it goes. Anybody have any burning questions on their mind that they want answered before we adjourn? The biggest question is, how fast can we turn this thing off, right?
I submitted my files to my econ class on accident.
Oh,
like
okay.
My pictures. So I went to go send them again, but the assignment was shut down. So.
Yeah, just email them directly to me. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll work.
Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, and for the first, you know, couple of weeks, like I said, until we get all these bugs worked out, don't worry about that stuff. If you do run into any issues at all on Sakai, just email them directly to me and I'll get them. I still would love to have them by that 1 o'clock deadline, just simply because that gives me time to organize them and get them ready to do the critiques and everything. But I would rather have them late than not have them at all. Trust me. All right. All right, guys, any other questions before we go? Awesome. Well, we're going to get you out about 40 minutes or so early. And if the sun's shining where you are, go enjoy it for a little bit. And we'll see you guys in a week. All right. We're out.